Here we go. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today it's Thursday afternoon, which means I'm joined by JP Mason. We're going to be speaking about a lot of transfers, incomings, outgoings. It's all happening, JP. But before we get stuck into all that, I want to offer our sincere condolences to Mark McCuish, who I got to know actually over the last few months through Alan Thompson. He's a pal of Tomo's. And obviously, we done a few gigs with Tomo, and Mark was always there. And just a lovely fella, lovely guy. And he's passed away, and he's got a young family, a wife, obviously, and well-known, JP, well-known in amongst the Celtic fan base. So our deepest condolences to his friends and his family at this really, really hard time for him. It came as something, a shock, I think, over the last couple of weeks. He was gravely ill, fought, battled like a lion, but unfortunately lost these battles. So thoughts and prayers with everybody who knew Mark. We have lots to talk about today, JP. Lots. I mean, there has been moments during the summer months where you think to yourself, there's no much. It's a slow news day. Not at the moment, it's not. Right. Have we got the big countdown? Have we got the big countdown for when the window slams shut? Is it 9? Have we got 9 days? Something like that? There's a lot of business happening. I want to start off with Kyogo. We're going to be talking about Matt O'Reilly, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Rio Atati, Mikey Johnston, Gustav Lagerbielke, Yuki Kobayashi. Anybody I've missed it? There's quite a lot of movement. Now, we spoke about, predicted a couple of months back, JP, that Kyogo would possibly be moving on. And I remember when that was getting discussed on social media, people thought it was a non-starter, a non-story rather. At the beginning of August, however, he changed his agency. Now, the big thing for me is he's gone to CA Base, one of the biggest agencies in the world, as you know, involved in music as well as football and elsewhere. And there's a story broken that Man City have an interest in Kyogo. First of all, JP, what is your thoughts when you heard that over the last 24 hours?
Well, a couple of friends texted me the Twitter link to Fabrizio Romano, who obviously has said it, has broken it. Or I don't know if he broke it, but he's reported it. And whenever you see his face next to a story, you're like, here we go. So
yeah, here we go. That's his tagline, isn't it?
That was accidental, by the way. I didn't mean that. But yeah, totally accidental. So yeah, when you see that, you're like, right, okay, there must be some sort of truth to this. Then you dig a bit deeper, you find out the Man City assistant coach is his former Vissel Kobe coach, and they've got a relationship, and it starts to feel a little bit like Wim Jansen getting Larsson from Feyenoord. Now I know Larsson was unsettled at Feyenoord, so it wasn't as if it was a hard deal to do. But would Larsson have come to Celtic if it hadn't been for Wim Jansen? Probably not. In fact, I think he said that. I'm pretty sure he said the reason he came was because he was close with Wim Jansen and he wanted to help him out. So I don't think Man City need any help, particularly in terms of their playing squad or who they need to attract or whatever. But if this guy, I think his name's Juan, I can't remember his full name, but if he said to Pep Guardiola, we should get this guy, he'd work really well in our system or whatever. The fact that it was specifically saying that he was going to be brought in as a winger as well, which means that they've identified him to play in a particular position. Of course, it could just be a name on a list, just like Celtic have had names on lists, and there could be a better option for them when they come to actually pulling the trigger to sign somebody. But then also the agent move as well. You're like, why at his age is he moving agent? Like, if there isn't a move afoot, because what would be the point in moving agent if you've not got a move on the horizon? Why would that agency pick him up if they don't know that there's a move where there's money to be made? So you start to think to yourself about life without Kyogo and how that would look at Celtic, because we've just become so used to him being the number one striker, enjoyed him scoring amazing goals, big goals. He scored at the top, the highest level he can for Celtic in the Champions League, as we knew he could. given these exploits in the Europa League in the first season. But you do start to wonder about what life is like, what life would be like without Kyogo. And then you start to wonder, well, he's got to leave at some point. But I can't wrestle with that in my head to make peace with the fact that it should be now rather than in like a season or 2 seasons, because he's close to 30, and you start to think to yourself, is this going to become like part of the model, i.e. buy for 4 million, sell for, I don't know, 20. I don't know how much they would offer for him. We know how much money they've got, and if Celtic have got him under contract, then they could drive the price up. Not that we've even spoken about how much Kyogo is worth, because that's another question, isn't it? Like, what is the value of Kyogo? What would a Kyogo sale to Man City look like in terms of the finances of it? We know how big it would be in terms of how big a hole it would leave for us. And then the remuneration of it at this point in time means little to me, because immediately if we were to sell him, we've got a huge hole to fill, a massive hole. Yeah. I mean, how many goals over the last 3 seasons has he scored?
I was just going to say there, this season, effectively, you'd probably bet on him to hit 100 goals. He scored 73 goals for Celtic so far since he came to the football club, and as well as that, 16 assists as well. How do you replace it? That's a big thing, JP. But I'm not convinced that Man City are the club that are interested in Kyogo. I think that if you join the dots up, okay, he changes at the age of 29, changes agency. It's not so that he can get a better image rights deal, right? It's because there's one last move in him in terms of a career move, which is going to be big money. And of course, when we bring any player to the football club, we will sell them the idea of it being a platform, JP. You can play in front of, full houses. We'll be playing in the Champions League. And then clubs will start to circle. And that's exactly what happens. And we will sell that player, that dream of using Celtic and Scottish football as a stepping stone to move into one of the big half a dozen leagues. And that's exactly what's happening here. But I think this is generated as something of a clarion call by the agency. It's a pitch. It's an agency pitch. What we now know, okay, that player exists. That player is potentially on the move in this window. And the 20 million figure has now been floated. So all this information that wasn't there before is out there. There are clubs all over Europe looking for a player like Kyogo, either on the wing or through the middle, who are now aware there's that player. Man City are interested in him. Wow, he's been pitched there, which means other clubs will now be looking at him. Apparently, Celtic will take 18 million quid for him. 29 years of age, 18 million pound will get Kyogo moving from Celtic Park. And that's why the tagline says it's going to invite other bids, JP. We're not going to get a bid for Man City. Honestly, I do not think we'll get a bid from Man City. But that's been put out there as a pitch, and it's an agency tactic, if you like, to get interest in a player. Not a pitch from Celtic. It's a pitch from the agency. And Celtic will get bids as a result of this. And it will be up here, as you say, Romano's in on it. We know that Fabrizio Romano's on payrolls here, there, and everywhere. I'm not saying it's a fraudulent thing. That's what he does. He gets paid by certain football clubs to drum up interest in certain footballers. That's what he does. So at the end of the day, Kyogo for me should be a Celtic player come the 1st of September. If he's not, I'll be absolutely gutted. That's the type of game that he is at his absolute best, JP. He showed it in the derbies. But this is all generated by his people, if you like, and his agency. And Celtic will now, I'm not going to say they're going to be bombarded with offers, but see, by the time the window closes, we'll have bids for Kyogo on the back of this story.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought about that until I sat down here 10 minutes ago, and you kind of mentioned it before we came on air. So I don't know. It's not something that I had contemplated at all. Even the agency thing, I hadn't thought too hard about it. But as soon as you start seeing Romano tweeting things and all the rest of it, and then there's many stories off the back of it, you then start to, as a putting 2 and 2 together, you'd be like, right, well, that might explain why we spent or overspent on Adam Ida.
Yeah.
Because I saw a tweet maybe the day after Ida signed by some bitter non-Celtic or Rangers fans sort of saying, never let us hear them moan about the financial gap in Europe again. They've just spent £10 million on a second choice striker, sort of saying that should mean that we suddenly become amazing in Europe. I mean, if we had £10 million players in every position, then I'd maybe go with his argument, but we definitely don't. So I don't think that signing Adam Ida is suddenly going to make us amazing in Europe. It might improve us in Europe, but we're not going to suddenly start bothering the latter stages of the Champions League just because we spent £10 million on one player. It just so happens that that's the deal that was put together, and sometimes, very rarely, do we get put into a position where we do need to spend big money. Like we had Edward on loan for a season. We knew the money that we would need to pay if we wanted him, and it was a case of, well, this makes good financial sense, so we'll pay the money. But there's been many other opportunities where we've had players on loan and not paid the money, or we've been linked with a player and not paid the money, whether it's Tony or Castagna or whoever other player in the past that we've just not been willing to push that boat out a little bit further. But the Ida signing, if you look at it through a certain way, you could start to say, oh, well, that makes sense because we're going to sell Kyogo, or we're planning to sell Kyogo. So,
and then you bring in a backup. You bring in a backup for Ida. See, this is the thing, JP. I'm going to ask you the question come the 1st of September on all of these players. Will Kyogo be a Celtic player? Yes or no?
My head says no. My heart says yes.
I'm the same. And it might actually extend to January, but this is the ball has started rolling now in terms of Kyogo's move out of Celtic, unfortunately. And you can kind of suss out how the agencies work and how high profile guys like Romano works, and then you're thinking, right, Man City aren't going to sign. Yeah, I know that there's a link there. They're not going to sign Kyogo, but someone will, and someone will be peaked, because it's not just Celtic in terms of recruitment that haven't got that list to hand all the time, JP, for every single position. There's other clubs who will react. They'll be reactive rather than proactive when it comes to player acquisition. So I'm going to stick with yourself as well. If he goes, I'll be gutted. I think he's been a sensational player. People say about, he's not sort of suited to Rodgers' system or style of play. Kyogo was involved in every single game last season. Never started every game. He was involved in every match last season. Not as prolific as he had been in previous years, but he scored big goals, JP. You've mentioned it. He scored big goals. You take away the Derby goals, it's a completely different
There's
season.
no way you're going to tell me that Brendan Rodgers would be happy about him leaving.
Nah, because you're losing quality, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you be happy at losing quality? He's one of the guys going into the Champions League that you think, right, I can count on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's hard to replace because we know how difficult it is to get quality in the door. Sometimes you get them in at a stage of their career where you need to do your bit to develop them to get up to that point, which is where Matt O'Reilly is. You lose a player like Kyogo, it's a massive, massive task to replace him. There's no way Rodgers would be happy with that. No way at all.
No.
So we've started off nice and positive. Next on the list is obviously there's been a few players linked to us as well. We're going to be talking to them around them. Kobayashi's away. He has been relieved of his duties and is away to Portugal. It was always going to happen, and I think that when you look at him and Ideguchi, 2 out of 6 ain't bad really. And I think we've done well with the aforementioned Kyogo, Hatate, Maeda, and Iwata. Iwata's a decent squad player. I don't see many people saying get rid of Iwata. Maybe he will leave if he's not getting enough game time or if Rodgers doesn't fancy him. But I think the 2 players that have moved on from our Japanese contingent, it's not a bad hit rate, is it? 2 from 6.
Well, comparing it to our hit rate as a whole in the last 10 to 20 years, I suppose that is quite good if you actually look at it and compare it to players of other nationalities. But if you just home in on the one market that we targeted and to get what we've, I think what's important to remember what we've actually managed to get back from Hatate, get back from Maeda and Kyogo, and to a lesser extent Iwata, but definitely those 3, I mean, they more than make up for the the shortcomings of the two guys that are going to be out the door, or that are out the door. I mean, it's a permanent deal, right? He's gone permanently. It's not a loan.
Yeah, he's gone. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at what they've given us. Maeda, huge player. Hatate struggled with injury a bit, but has definitely given us big moments. Goals against Rangers, other important goals in the league. And we've certainly seen enough to know from Hatate that if he has a full season where he's on it, and currently he's not, because he's had a game where at Easter Road where I don't think that he was anywhere near his top form. But if he has a season where over the course of it he's giving you numbers like even close to Matt O'Reilly numbers, like say 12 goals, 12 assists, something like that, where he's just a bit off Matt O'Reilly. I mean, that's the sort of numbers that you can then present and talk about a big money move. Maeda, I don't know how much Maeda. I mean, Maeda's only still in his mid-20s, only 25, 26, something like that.
You tend to forget that about Maeda, don't you? You never really consider that he's the same age as Mikey Johnson.
Aye, and think how big Maeda is for us, and we're not really. I wouldn't be concerned about Mikey Johnson leaving. I wish him well. I hope he goes on to have a good career, because he's not going to play week in, week out at Celtic, and at 25, you should be.
What are they talking fee-wise? Are they talking something like £3 million for him?
I don't even know. I don't think the article I read, it was Burnley, right?
Sheffield United and Burnley, but it looks like
Burnley didn't mention a fee. But yeah, the Kobayashi thing, it did seem quite apparent early on that he didn't look cut out for what we need him for. You know, like the rough and tumble of the Scottish League week in, week out, because I said it before, that's where we play the majority of our games, and if you can't handle it week in, week out in the Scottish League, then you know it shows a lot about you and your character if you can't do it. Some people can do it, some people can't. Some people adapt it and just are able to perform, and especially under that pressure of especially the home games as well, where it's just like we must win these games. Same away as well, obviously, but the home games as well. It's just the scrutiny that you're put under. There's no room to be an average or mediocre player, and average or mediocre players tend to end up at clubs like, is it Portimonense? Is that the name of the club? I mean, it's not like, you know, you look at Connor Goldson's at Aris Limassol. He's there for a reason. He's not gone to a top level championship club or a bottom level English Premier League club. Kobayashi's gone to a lowly Portuguese side, and that's probably going to be his level, you'd expect. He might prove me wrong and get a move to Sporting Lisbon or something like that if he does well, but
who was the last guy that did that? Jack Hendry?
Yeah.
Maybe? Written off, and then he goes away and has a decent career.
I'm not just saying this, but I'll go back and say I didn't think Jack Hendry was as bad a player as he was made out. He took part in 3 consecutive defeats for Celtic, and I think a lot of that blame was put on him rather than the team. And it was just unfortunate that when you play 3 games in a row and you lose 3 games in a row for Celtic, if you've played in all those games, what isn't remembered is that he played in a completely different defence in all 3 of those games. Never playing with the same centre half partner for a consistent run. Yes, people I'm sure will undoubtedly point to his sort of wee run that he went on at Firhill, where he was made to look foolish because he sort of went to go forward and then turned back on himself and then turned in on himself again. And yeah, not great for the highlights reel, but he's gone on to have a fairly decent career. He's not stayed at like a totally low level. Like, he played at the top level in Belgium, was quite respected, earned a move, a big money move, saw the bright lights, quote unquote, of Saudi Arabia, and has gone out there. But I guess looking at the brief sort of window into his lifestyle, Saudi Arabia probably would be right for him in terms of, like, he'd be like, all right, okay, well, I can go and earn loads and loads of money and be under very little pressure, and then, you know, maybe get a move later in my career back to another league. But I can't really, as much as it, like I said, Dembele being there, it's just mad to me when you see.
He's the one that I just feel you're too young and too good to go out to grass. Obviously Jota as well, but it didn't work out for Jota over there. But he was the one player that I thought to myself, really? I mean, we know that it's mountains of cash you're getting over there, JP. But you could be playing for us. That's not going to happen, though, because obviously he doesn't like Brendan Rodgers, or it's the other way about. But there's quite some really interesting comments, right, in the comment section. We were talking about it yesterday, actually. We were up in Glasgow filming the latest episode of This Is Acsom with Matt Costello. Now, Matt Costello is best known as Stevie the Bookie, who's still game. And it's interesting because he's got a wealth of experience, obviously, as an actor, JP, right? And we were just sitting afterwards, just chatting about that, about, being gutted. And it was Jim Orr. You know what Jim's like at times. He's just very balanced. And I says to Jim, you don't get disappointed when he goes, no, because I'm old. I've seen it all. You know, we've lost Kenny Dalglish. We've lost Charlie Nicholas. We've lost Henrik Larsson. We get over it. We always get over it. And that was a discussion. It was, there's always another hero just around the corner at Celtic. And it's true. It's absolutely true, right? But I do feel at the moment that we're on the cusp of being a really, really good football side. And I said the other week, just last week actually, that I think at that point I thought we're 3 or 4 players away. And I'm not, Celtic will never, under the circumstances we're in at the moment with regards to the gap getting wider and wider financially between a league like Scotland and the top leagues, we'll never compete at the absolute top table of Europe. But what we can do is better than participate. And it, all we've been doing is just being there and participating. We can compete better. We're not going to win it, JP. So going into the 8 games, you want to keep as much quality as possible. If Celtic have got a rabbit to pull out the hat, brilliant. But I don't think the recruitment team fills us with that confidence. If Kyogo leaves, right, we're going to get on to Hatate and the likelihood of him and the likelihood of O'Reilly and CCV leaving. But if Kyogo leaves, they need to pull a rabbit out the hat, JP. And does that rabbit exist? Are we prepared to do that? Or are we just going to go back to kind of previous form, sign a player and hope to develop him? Is that where we are? I mean, could we pull that player out the bag, do you think? I mean, I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to give you a name that's coming up the comment section right now. And it's French Eddie. It's Odds and Edouard. People are saying, just go out and buy him. Right. I'm not sure that can work because of his wages. However, I don't think we're going to go out and do, make a signing that's probably regarded as a marquee signing. And it's at that point that it becomes difficult to progress as a football club because, we'll have enough to do well in Scotland. Is that the ambition of the board? Because I don't think it's the ambition of Brendan, and it's not the ambition of me as a Celtic fan, and I don't speak for anyone other than myself. And I know that there's a lot of other Celtic supporters out there who want to do something in Europe. Not win the tournament, but they want to progress in the tournament, JP.
Yeah. No, I think with the Kyogo thing, replacing him is, I don't want to sound like some sort of bored apologist, but replacing him, you're talking about a guy that's come along and everybody widely thinks he's the best striker since Larsson. It's been 20 years since we had Henrik Larsson. So there's been an awful lot of strikers that have clocked in and clocked out of Celtic since then who have done okay. Some have done really, really well. You'd think of like Dembele being one of them, Edouard being another, but then there's so many that we haven't had success with. I wouldn't have confidence in this current recruitment team that doesn't really exist being able to go and find someone that can fill Kyogo's boots. It's even harder a task when you don't have that structure in place. If you do have that structure in place, it's still a hard task. It makes it even harder when you've not got everybody in position to do their individual jobs. So the frustrating thing for me is, I was thinking about this after talking about Matt Riley and the idea that he would maybe be in the Celtic side that would go into the Champions League this season. It's like when you've got a player. I mean, how many times have we gone up against sides that have had that one player or that 2 players, usually one, that is by far and away the best player in that? I mean, look at Shakhtar Donetsk with Mudryk.
First guy that came to my mind there, Mudryk.
So he earned those 2 points that they got in Champions League against us himself, because he scored in the away game when we played them in. Did we play them in Poland? Because we couldn't play them in Ukraine. We played them in Poland. Sure.
That's right. Yeah. Was it Warsaw?
Aye. So he scored in that game, and then he scored in the game at Celtic Park. So an £80 million player was the difference between us winning and losing that goal. Certainly not losing, but we didn't win the game because he earned a point for his side. Wouldn't it be amazing to go into a Champions League group stage with players in our side that are like, oh wow, that guy's worth 25 million. We know he's worth 25 million, but we've got him, even if it is just for this stage.
Yep.
And same with Kyogo, like we've got a potentially 20 million. Well, we know, everybody knows that how invaluable Kyogo has been to Celtic, but when you start like putting figures next to his name, suddenly you've got a £20 million striker and a £25 million midfielder. Chuck in another 15 to £20 million midfielder with Rio Hatate, then you start realising how good the team is on paper with a number next to them.
He's in that top 6 players in Celtic's squad that you go into a Champions League game confident in that player. Hatate's another one. O'Reilly's another one. I've named my 6 a few times. And how great would it be, JP, to have another 3 on top of that? So that when you go into these games, that difference is getting, shorter and shorter. The other one in the same campaign for me was in Kyogo, who went to Chelsea as well. And I think he was a difference in the games that we played. So, will we ever have a player that's worth 50, 60, 70, 80? Not in the here and now, but the type of player that we have is your Kyogo, Matt O'Reilly, Rio Hatate, guys that can make a massive difference and change, even at that level, completely change the complexion of the game. And if we sell 1 or 2 of them, because we're going to be talking about Matt, we're going to be talking obviously about Carter Vickers and Andrew Hatate, then we can't replace them like for like. Because let's take, for instance, right, the name that's popping up in the comments, and I'm going to get to the comments as soon as I can. Odsonne Edouard. What's he on at Crystal Palace? 80 grand a week?
Probably. The thick end, I'd say between 80 and 100, surely.
We can't buy him. We just can't do it. We can't make that deal happen. And that's why when we do bring in a player of absolute top calibre in terms of the profile, the history, the experience, it's at the stage that Joe Hart was at. It's at the stage that Kasper Schmeichel is at. That's when we can get a player like that. And unfortunately, if it's an outfield player, they won't be as able to play at 36 or 37. And that's when we get these types of players. So Edouard, I love the thought of it. I thought he was a smashing player. I'd have him back. He works really well with Brendan Rodgers. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think we, in terms of the recruitment, are built for that type of signing. I think what we'll do is we'll try and bring somebody in. Ida will be, if Kyogo goes, there's no way yet, Ida will be the number 1 choice and we'll bring in a backup. And I think that's what we'll do. And that backup will be the boy that we develop over the period of 18 months to 2 years, give him game time. The type of player always meant to be JP, but it didn't come to fruition. That's what I think we'll do. And the frustration for me as a Celtic supporter is, how much money do we need in the bank? Seriously. I keep hearing this. We've got a model. We're a great, brilliantly run club. Well, there's aspects of the club that are not brilliantly run. Come on, let's be honest here, right? If you're looking at the football department, the recruitment's not well run at this moment in time, right? If you look at the football department, the youth development system's not well run, right? And I absolutely implore anybody to come back to me with a list of players that we've developed in the last 20 years who have played 50 or more games for the first team in the last 20 years. And that will prove that we don't do it properly. And that's part of the football department, JP. So it's easy for people to say, oh, we're really, really well run. Not every single aspect of the club is. And it's okay to say that, right? Because would it not be great to improve on every aspect where we're not that well run? And the recruitment, again, we'll go to all the guys that were brought in, fairly cheap and sold at a high profit, right? What is that down to? Is that down to the guys at the top that are signing off the deals? Or is it down to the managers who have developed the players? Because you can split it right down the middle. There's been as many flops as there's been successes. So, you look at the way that the players that came in under Ange developed. Massive part of that was down to Ange. A massive part of it has since been down to Brendan Rodgers. And let's not forget Neil Lennon, Jeremy Frimpong. Lenny played a massive part in the development of Jeremy Frimpong, who has spoken about Neil Lennon being something of a father figure, goes from a 300 grand under-23 player at Man City, basically a reserve, a youth player, to probably one of the biggest assets in European football right now. So it's not down to having these incredible masterclass guys at the top of the tree of the football club, JP, who are brilliant at spotting players, and they've got this fantastic recruitment structure. They bring in loads and loads of players, and the manager needs to work and develop with them. And every so often, we get an absolute nugget. And as soon as we get a nugget, we sell them. And that's the problem. So, yeah, there's loads of stuff we do really well, but there's a lot of stuff we can do so much better.
I see about the whole money thing. I don't know if this has been spoken about in an article or anything like that. It's just something I was thinking about. But is it the case that, I know we were talking a couple of weeks ago about surely we're not waiting to sell Matt O'Reilly to then spend money. Mm-hmm. But is there some sort of mechanism in financial fair play that you, in a certain calendar year or something, you can only spend X amount of what you get in? Like, I know we're sitting in a pot of money. Does that mean, would we be able to just take, for example, 30 million out of that 100 million and just spend it on players? Or do you have to actually balance the books in terms of...
There is a limit which is affecting a lot of the English clubs, isn't it, with their spending in terms of turnover versus spend. And I think that when it comes to Celtic, the figures, obviously it's a percentage, so it will affect every team. But we can still afford it. What was my figure? What was my very specific figure? 36 million. We can still afford to go out and spend 36. My frustration will be that we only do it because we sell a player like Matt O'Reilly. Because to strengthen, and even Brendan Rodgers has spoken about it, it's not something that we came up with, JP. Fans have been saying it for years. Don't sign 9 players for 21 million. Sign 3 players or 4 players for that price, and bring in a higher calibre player and more quality to give you more of a chance to compete in the Champions League. My frustration at the moment is I don't think we're going to go into that Champions League group stage fully prepared. That's my issue. Because at this moment in time, with the squad that we've got, I think we would win the league. I do. I think we would win the league right now. What's that down to? Is that down to how great we are, or is it down to really how poor the rest of Scottish football is? Because, I mean, there's not a lot of money in Scottish football, JP. There really isn't. And when you look at the way that certain clubs who should be well run are run, it's embarrassing. Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen in recent times. Dundee United have just got promoted back in the league.
Well, you've got to commend Aberdeen for their business on Bojan Miovski, because I think they bought him for like $500,000 or something like that, and then sold him for close to 7. So that at least shows that it's possible to play for a team outside the Celtic and Rangers and still get a move. So that you would hope that would be a bit of a poster boy sale for other attracting other people to come to Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, whoever. I mean, God knows what's going on with Hearts at the moment. I mean, that talk about wheels coming off. I mean, getting beat off Falkirk in the League Cup. I mean, surely Hearts should have been targeting a long run in that competition. Not that there's that many rounds to play now, but you'd think that they would be targeting that as something like, well, I mean, Aberdeen got to the final last season, narrowly lost to Rangers. Hearts would have been looking at that as a target, surely, and then to lose to Falkirk off the back of a pretty damaging defeat to Dundee as well. Not that I'm sympathising with them in any way. I think it's absolutely brilliant, but yeah, I think that the Miovski signing definitely shows that there's a platform there for players to come and potentially a stepping stone to a bigger and better move.
But every one of these clubs, what's their ambition? To become third and get a run in a cup?
No, I know. You know, there's no way they were going to hang on to a guy that's worth $7 million. If someone's willing to pay $7 million, I don't think there's any world that we can live in where Aberdeen hold on to that player. But I think hopefully that does, like I say, give other people the belief that they can come to Scotland, not just Celtic or Rangers, and then if they play well enough over the course of say 2 years, then they could get a move. Because I think a lot of people just think that you can only get a big move if you play in the Champions League or play European football. And I know he did play European football for them, and that's probably played a part in his move. But he didn't play football deep into a competition with them. I mean, he only probably played early rounds, and then that was it, because they've not progressed, as neither have we. Which is it's mad to think how long it's been since we've. I hate having that stick beating on top of us all the time about how poor we are in Europe, because we could have and should have done so much better in Europe.
Yeah, and that's why we're having this discussion. Is the very fact that we're on the cusp of that again. You know, we could do something to make sure that isn't the case, and we're not sitting here in a year's time where we will have to play qualifiers saying, if only we got our business done early. If only we had brought in enough quality. I mean, you mentioned Miofsky there. Miofsky was a player we could have signed. We wouldn't give Aberdeen £6.8 million for any player. And that's, again, an issue for me, because we're now sitting, if and when we do lose Kyogo, we're one striker again. And it's a step back. Are we prepared for the Champions League? Absolutely not. Now, talking to Aberdeen, Mr. C is coming on. Remember the shaman? Thankfully, I don't think it's the same guy. We can all relax. But where is he now, JP? Mr. C.
Did he not own a club in London? I'm sure he owned like a nightclub. I think it was maybe Heaven, or
right.
There is a club in London that he was involved with. I don't know if he still is.
There's a strange clip that pops up every now and again where the shaman did the halftime entertainment at a Premiership game, and was it Arsenal? Was it Highbury?
I don't know. I know the one you're talking about, because they're all obviously miming, playing instruments. It's pretty.
Was it Ebenezer Good that they sang as well? These are good.
That was the peak of their powers, wasn't it? Ebenezer.
Was.
I don't think they got much bigger than that, but
was. Yeah, Boss Drum was a good album. Right. Thankfully, we can all relax, because our recruitment is top level, and we'll find the get to be established quality replacement. I think there's a wee air of sarcasm there from Mr. C. Paddy Burns comes in also to say, I get so bored with the sport. Yeah, I mean, we kind of label it on the board, JP, but there's a lot of people really involved in this whole process. And unfortunately for me, we don't have that structure. We've spoken long and hard about it. And then what happens is somebody who does have a slick operation come along at any point and take one of our biggest assets. That's the fear with Kyogo. I'm going to move on from that, though, to talk about O'Reilly. Now, Matt O'Reilly, all I hear from Celtic fans kind of supporting the way that the club is run, this is what we do. This is the model. Matt O'Reilly, you bring him in, you develop him, you sell him on, you make loads of money. But again, the problem with that, JP, is if you don't continue the cycle in the background. So Matt O'Reilly comes in 2.5 years ago, probably does better than anybody expected, I would suggest, in the last 2.5 years, right? But where's the next one? Because the next one, you're probably bringing him in at the time that Odin Holm comes into the building. So how's he developed? Because he's not going to step in. You know, and I think that if you're doing part of it right, and once it comes to the end of Matt O'Reilly's cycle, he goes on, you need to have somebody ready to step in, and we don't have that, in my view. And so what you're going to get is another gaping hole in the Celtic side, where there used to be a real quality there.
I guess if you look in the past, things like Edouard being in the building ready to replace Belly, but we didn't have anybody in the building ready to replace Tierney.
No.
So if you look at big sales that have happened, I mean, who was in the building to replace Van Dijk when we sold Van Dijk? I can't really remember everybody that was. I can remember defenders that were there or thereabouts, but I don't know if there was anybody identified to be like, right, that's the guy that's going to. Was Ayer here already at that point? Was he out on? Yeah,
but the thing with Ayer, again, the cycle. We had to wait for that cycle to come to the point where he was good enough, really, for the first team. But you're right, Van Dijk's a great example. The minute you've seen him, you realise, right, at some point in the next couple of years, he's gone. Back then, it was probably 3 years. The cycle was probably 3 years. So then, as you were saying there, you need to find somebody who can step in. And I actually felt, and I'm not saying he was as good as, but I just felt Denier was a no-brainer for us. We should have pursued that. Maybe he didn't want to come to Celtic, JP, but you're right. I don't think we sufficiently replaced these players. And it looks like we're in the same situation again.
Well, potentially it depends on what business we do if and when O'Reilly goes, but it now does seem to be that is the ultimate end game, is that Matt O'Reilly's going to go to Brighton. As a club, you can't really argue with that as a platform for him to go to. Next, people will pointed it and be like, oh, well, they're not that big a club. Their support is half the size. The difference is the where they play in the English Premier League. And if he does as well for them as he's done for us, he won't be there for long. He'll be somewhere much bigger and better after Brighton. I mean, of course, it's down to how Brighton play as a team, really, because they can't just expect Mattarelli to do it all. But if he gets into that team and clicks in that team, then he'll not be there for long, I don't think. Then that will become his Southampton for Van Dijk. It will become that kind of, I guess, for Wanyama as well, who went on to Spurs. Van Dijk goes on to Liverpool. That might have been something that's kind of pointed to in terms of when he signed for Celtic. Not that there was. I mean, I don't know how many clubs were interested in Mattarelli when we went in for him, or if it was a case of we were the best option for him, like clearly the standout best option for him. But it might be the case that if we are looking at an Engels, if that is the guy that we're looking at, that may be the case with him. Celtic might be the best option that's on the table for him. We just have to hope that is the case. And he does see, or whoever potential replacement for Mattarelli, that they do see Celtic as that kind of club that you come and do well for 2 years and then move on. And if an Engels or whoever else comes in and we have to pay a bit of money for them and they do well for us in those 2 years, I'll be happy because we're getting a player that will do well for us. But don't get me wrong, losing Mattarelli is a massive, massive blow to this team and the club really as a whole, just because of how he's performed for us for a start, and just his overall just laid back.
What about his influence? You can tell that he's a big influence now, and I don't just mean with goals and assists, but in amongst that group, JP.
Yeah, I mean, despite being still young, I mean, he's 23. He's still young, but I think when you've played that amount of games and contributed that much in terms of the football team, and your the stats are next to your name from the previous season, that surely is going to command the respect in the dressing room. Like, to players that are already there, have been there and done that for Celtic, whether it's James Forrest or Callum McGregor or whoever, they'll be impressed from a kind of senior point of view that this guy's come in and hit the numbers that he's done, that he's had. But then also new signings coming in. Nicholas Kuhn coming in, and there's a guy playing to his left, and he's like, well, that's the sort of numbers he's hitting. And Kuhn knows from his little time here that you need to be hitting good numbers all the time and getting assists and goals and all the rest of it, because you're in a position at Celtic where you're getting a lot of chances, and it's kind of, that's how people judge you. And then he's looking to his left, and there's a young kid, 23 years old, who's absolutely been the fulcrum of Celtic's success in the last couple of years. No Mattarelli, potentially no league, potentially no double. He brings out so much good in other players, I think, because they want to get up to his level, and they'll do that.
Setting standards, isn't it? Setting standards for new recruits coming in. That's your level. This is what you need to do.
Exactly.
And then, you know the kind of the attitude of the player, JP. You've done your research on him, and you know that obviously he applies himself. So if a player comes to Celtic, they'll look at O'Reilly, the way that he approaches his business, and think, well, in order for me to hit these heights, this is the way I need to approach this.
And also doing it through the middle, or not the middle, but doing it through a run of games whereby the transfer window's open. Daily news articles about O'Reilly. I know he's obviously got Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, so it's very hard to stay away from that. And I kind of watched him. I wasn't at the game on Sunday, but I watched the game up north where I was, and I watched him going round the pitch at the end, and you could sort of see that. I don't know. I just got a feeling that might be his last game.
Did you get a sense that might just be him?
Based on very little, but just on the fact that he's not the type of guy that would go and be looking for adulation from the Green Brigade or anything like that, you know, to make it obvious that it was his last game. But I just think that these conversation with James Forrest as he was walking around, be interesting to know what that conversation was about. I'm pretty sure it wasn't about where they were going out later on. You know, I think it was more possibly about, you know, this could be the last time you do this.
I'm going to miss this place. Oh dear. Well,
it will be hard for him I think how much he's developed as a person and a footballer in the last 2.5 years. Like, he's gone from being nowhere in football, really. Let's face it, he wasn't going anywhere at MK Dons, and suddenly he's got this platform to perform. And like I said, when I saw him sitting, just sort of drinking in the empty stadium at the Bernabeu, and then mum and dad come down and he gets to hug them, and there's pictures and all that. He's taking pictures of that moment. You know, that's an incredible turnaround in someone's fortunes.
It's not like he's letting it happen. He really is navigating his own career. A lot of players, once they're on that kind of treadmill, JP, it's like it just happens for them kind of thing. Whereas I think he's got like real fixed ambitions within a very short space of time. And the thing as well, even if you're able to shut out the outside noise, you imagine the amount of interest that's in him and the amount of calls he's getting and his agent being... So there's this constant chat that could unsettle him, you know?
But to still perform at the level that he has done in those games for Celtic is testament to him as a person, you know? Because it does seem inevitable now. I'm just waiting for that text or that moment where it's like, all right, okay, that's him away.
Who were the sore ones for you? Because as I say, I was talking to Jim, and Jim's from a slightly older era than me. I obviously cannot remember Dalglish leaving Celtic because it was before I was born. I remember Nicholas playing for Celtic in his first era because my old fella was going to the games and all that. But I can't really remember him leaving, to be honest, in '83. So the sore ones for me were probably Henrik Larsson was a tough one for me. Kieran Tierney. And I'm going to say Ange. Ange was a tough one as well. They're the three biggies. I know we've had Jota and other guys who I love to bits, but they're the three that I just thought, oh God, that's a bitter pill.
John Collins in the 90s was a tough one, just because he'd been so good for Celtic, and you didn't know what was on the horizon. You didn't know. When did Collins leave? 95 or 96? I think it was 96, wasn't it?
Let me think, just off the top of my head, because Burns was still in charge. Tommy Burns was still the manager when John Collins left. And you're right, we then going to stop the 10.
But you didn't know that was coming. You were thinking it was going to be 11, 12, 13 or whatever. And you're losing a guy in John Collins who you know has scored against them. They certainly wouldn't have enjoyed playing against him because it was not just the one piece of real quality that we had, but it was definitely somebody that you knew could do damage against them. Much like Paul McStay as well. Paul McStay did score against Rangers. He was unfortunately not in the best of Celtic sides over his time there. But Matt Riley going's going to hurt when it comes. It's just you think to yourself, what if? And as I said to you before, you don't get diamonds like that often. So when they do come along, you want to kind of hold on to them as long as possible. I understand football's a short career, and God Almighty, he'll be 26 before he knows it, and then suddenly people are talking about you creeping towards 30, and you know, I get that you've got to, especially if he wants to test himself at the highest level. I mean, he's tested himself in Europe, acquitted himself well in Europe in the Champions League. I don't think he embarrassed himself far from it. So there's a very small part of me that is intrigued as to how he will do in that league and up against the quality player that he. But I've no doubt about it that if he does go, you'll see a former goalkeeper of ours raving about him on Match of the Day quite a lot. I don't doubt that to be the case.
No, you're right. You're absolutely spot on. Listen, we're going to live in the here and now until that day arrives. Michael McDonald has tuned into our interview with Terry Christian. It was great fun last week, JP, and he highly recommends it. Yeah, go and have a look at that. It's gone down storm. A Celtic State of Mind, of course. We interview people who are Celtic minded, and they might not be game-going fans, but they've got a connection in some way, shape or form. And this week it's Matt Costello, who you'll recognise from Still Game, but he's a great actor. The first time I've ever seen him on the telly was in Taggart. I think any Scottish actor that comes through the ranks has to appear on Taggart at some point. So I do remember him on there, and he's great chat. So tune in at 6 o'clock tomorrow night on A Celtic State of Mind. Subscribe to the channel, which is free. Give us a big thumbs up. Barry McCormack tells us that Mr. C is still DJing. There you go. And McLaughlin P says that Naismith's getting the sack soon. Nice whistle. Naismith's getting the sack soon. I think, I've said this before, Stephen Robinson is the man for Hearts and Tony Docherty's a man for Hibs. They're the two kind of managers that they two teams should be looking at. Martin Davey. Paul, Celtic do it all the time. Build a team, then sell the best players. And I think I was talking about this last week, JP, because I was talking about the team that beat Barcelona and we get through to the last 16 of the Champions League and we face Juventus. It was the last time we got to that stage of the tournament. But following on from that campaign, we sold Victor Wanyama, Gary Hooper, Kelvin Wilson and Joe Ledley. So it is frustrating because it does feel like we do that. I mean, we didn't do it with the team that got to Seville because they were all at a different kind of stage of their careers, weren't they? And I don't think that financially we would have got much money back for some of them a year or two after Seville. And so it.
Would you not say that football has changed a lot in those 20? Well, it definitely has changed a lot in the 20 years since Seville. But this whole idea of, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't seem like that the players that came to Celtic at that time were looking at the next move. They were looking at staying at Celtic for a decent amount of time. Like Chris Sutton said he did. Chris Sutton said he didn't want to leave Celtic at the end of his time. Neil Lennon.
John Hartson was the same. I don't think John Hartson wanted to leave.
Neil Lennon wasn't coming to Celtic with an eye on a move back to the Premiership for like 20 million because of his age. And then there was players like Petrov. I guess Petrov was the one really out of them all that had that kind of shelf life that he could go and get a move to England and play down there. But there didn't seem to be that kind of culture back then of like, oh, well, we're obviously going to lose that player because he'll go to England. They weren't really the right age profile, as you said. Right. So we assembled a team that were all looking to do the same thing at the same time, probably knew that they didn't have a lot of time left, and that might have been an extra motivation for them in games where you're really looking to dig out a result. You know, if it's Boa Vista away, defending the Larsson goal, just heroically until the final whistle. You might not have got that out of those players if they weren't at that level and at that stage in their career where they're like, we're going to give it our all, because if we're going to ever do anything in Europe, it's going to be with this side. And none of them, as far as I know, have ever played in another European final. Do you know?
No, I mean the unfortunate thing for Big Hartson,
Paul Lambert is the exception, probably. Of course, before it,
Big Hartson played in 2 European finals before he came to Celtic for Arsenal.
Oh, did he?
He did, but I think what Martin O'Neill was great at.
Was that one of them?
Cup winners' cup. He scored in one of them actually. He scored in one, and then there was that one. Remember the player Naeem who used to play for Spurs, and he scored that goal from distance over Seaman. So he played in that. He played in that game. But you're right about the players, and also the kind of profile. The cycle is shorter now, JP. So when somebody comes to Celtic, you're right. They're looking for their next move, and that cycle can be 2 years or 2.5 years in Matt O'Reilly's case. But I think Martin O'Neill was great at bringing players who might have been a wee bit short in confidence, because obviously Chris Sutton had that poor spell at Chelsea. Alan Thompson had a poor spell at Aston Villa. I always look at that FA Cup final, the pre-season before the both players came to Celtic, and they were both not even unused subs. They were sitting in the stand. So Chelsea versus Aston Villa. Chelsea win 1-0. Zola scores the goal, and Sutton and Thompson are having a drink in the players' lounge after the game. Not just unused subs. They've not even they've not been stripped, and it's like that crossroads in their career. Fast forward a few months, and they're both playing for Celtic under O'Neill. John Hartson had his troubles with injuries and failing a few medicals here and there. He failed the Celtic medical, and O'Neill just signed him anyway. So it was almost as if there was a group of players there who had something to prove. But like you said, they wanted to prove it at Celtic. They didn't want to use us as a platform, and get back in at a level in English football. It was the end in London that Mr. C was in.
Oh, the end, of course.
The end, there you go. George Nicholson, MJ seemingly in talks with Burnley. And this is the thing. If you look at all the surplus to requirements players that are leaving the building, JP, I think we're doing pretty well. Joe Hart obviously retired, but you've then got Haksabanovic, James McCarthy, although I don't think that's been announced. Marco Tilly out on loan, Rocco Vata's away. Benjamin Siegrist, cheers Lenny, Boston Lawal, Yuki Kobayashi, and Kwon out on loan. And it looks as though Mikey Johnston, Gustav Lagerbielke will be joining them as well. So all that type of player, you're thinking, right, that we're doing good business. We're cutting the squads, replace it with quality, but we don't really want O'Reilly and CCV and Kyogo and Hatate to be in that bracket. That's the frustration. Big shout out to Neil Lennon. He's had a tough few weeks, hasn't he? And he's lost his job as well. What does the future hold for Neil Lennon in football, in your view?
He seems to make bad choices of countries to go to. I mean, from the little I know about Romanian football and how that's been kind of, all the stuff's been reported, it did seem like it's a bit wild, some of the things that, like the whole story / non-story of him potentially letting loose at the side of the pitch or the side of a training ground. Like, I don't know if that's even true, or if that's just genuinely, if it was somebody within the club trying to stir up stuff against him because it created headlines. It kind of weakened his position in a way. You just look back to the Cypriot side, was it Omonia Nicosia? He was with them and obviously had a run in the Europa League with them, went to Old Trafford with them, ran Man United pretty close, which goes to show that he still has something to offer. But it just doesn't seem like he keeps making the wrong choices. I mean, Romanian football sounds a bit wild in terms of what's said about players and what's said about coaches and everything else. It seems a bit kind of, I don't know, it feels a lot less professional than Scottish football, and that's saying something.
Pulling the trigger after half a dozen games even.
Just from the insight you've had with articles that you've read about Neil Lennon since he's been there, it doesn't sound very stable, put it that way. And the fact that they were willing to pull the trigger so soon doesn't give you much faith in their football and kind of nous or abilities. I mean, I don't know. It's just a weird one. The whole thing with that Rahmani player guy that went to Sparta Prague, it sounded like a bit of a weird situation with him as well. Like, Lennon said he was preparing for a game with him, and then suddenly, having been told that the player wasn't going to be sold, they sold him, and they sold him for less than what they were initially wanting. I don't know. It sounds
unworkable. It sounds unworkable.
It does. It does.
He'd spoken to Aberdeen and Hibs.
I know.
So, is there a future in Scottish football?
Aberdeen seem to have done the right thing with their current manager. He seems to be getting a tune out of them. David Gray, time will tell. I mean, where will David Gray be mid-November? Will he still be in the dugout at Hibs? I wonder. Would it have been a good idea to go back for Neil Lennon? I know we are certainly a good advert for a manager going back and being successful for a second time in the current scenario. So I don't know how much that would have been welcomed at Hibs, but I certainly feel like he could do a job for a team like Hibs or a club like Hibs. His knowledge of the game is there for all to see. People will say that he's not good enough anymore. I don't think he's good enough to manage Celtic, but I think he could do a job for another team in our mad world that we live in here.
Yeah, Scottish football. I'm pretty sure we'll see him again. One final thing, Thomas comes in to ask, how's the hit list looking? Every pre-season, I write a list of players that I think should leave the football club. Let's have a look at them then. Scott Bain, still in the building. Benji Siegrist, he's gone. I said Montgomery should go out and loan. Never heard much about him since then. Lagerbielke could be happening. Kobayashi, he's away. Welsh, still in the building. Home, I said loan him out. Still in the building. Kwon, he's gone, out on loan. Kelly, I said loan him out. We're going to sell him for 400 grand by the looks of it. Yang, haven't heard anything about that. Tillio, he's away. O's away. Vata's away. Johnson's about to go. Haksabanovic, McCarthy, oh, a good run. Shaw, who knows? What's Shaw up to? Who knows? Is he the guy watching all the podcasts and reporting back to Peter Lowell if you say something nasty about him? John Joe Kenny, he's obviously on loan until the end of the year. Bernaby's the same. And Lawal, he's away as well. So not a bad hit rate, to be fair. JP, Matt O'Reilly wasn't on it. Neither was Rio or Kyogo or Cameron Carter-Vickers, I've got to say. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved there.
Carter-Vickers chat, has he been linked with, is it Atalanta?
Atalanta, Fenerbahce. Yeah, so...
Well, he's not going to Turkey, let's face facts. There's no way.
And the Atalanta one's probably on the back of the Matt O'Reilly, looking at O'Reilly. But the thing is, we haven't even got him a replacement yet. So we can't entertain losing Cameron Carter-Vickers at this stage. We've not even got him a replacement, a partner, sorry. So no chance, because then that puts us right up against it in terms of the centre halves. Cannot happen. No matter what the bid is. Can't let it happen.
But, I mean, a week is a long time in football, but it'll be interesting to see who's away and who's come in by this time next Thursday. Do you think we'll have signed players next Thursday that we don't know anything about?
It wouldn't surprise me. The way that Celtic are doing their business, that would not surprise me, JP, in the slightest. I mean, would it surprise me if we were to make big signings like £8 to £10 million? That wouldn't surprise me either. The biggest issue I've got is losing one of these key players, someone who's a starter for Celtic, losing that quality, because we cannot replace him like for like. If Matt O'Reilly was to leave before the end of the window, the guy that steps in is Bernardo, and for me, he's a different type of player. But he's the guy that gets the jersey. And then behind him, whoever we bring in, we're nurturing him into the team to become the player that we hope he can develop into. But Bernardo's the next one to get the first team jersey. So we might have to change and adapt to that as well. We will be here every single kick of the ball, every step of the way, 1,500 strong on a Thursday afternoon, JP. That's astonishing. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. By the way, 8 tickets left to come and see Charlie Mulgrew and Paddy Mullane at Gracie's at the end of next month. Ticket link underneath the video. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Bob.